Hello everyone, my name is Jisung. From now on, I will introduce you Chapter 17, The Media Effects. This chapter mainly covers the impact of the media on its audiences, especially the children. In this article, you will be able to read many different opinions on the media effects from different scholars. But before learning precisely the scholars' arguments, let's briefly go over two incidents which closely related to the media and its audiences. On 12th February 1993, two 11-year-old lads a little kid named James Boger to a disused railway. Then they hit the kid and threw bricks at the kid and eventually left him dead on the tracks. They also imitated an event in the horror film named Child's Play by throwing blue paint on Boger's face. On 20th April 1999, a horrible incident happened in the Columbian High School. Two pupils killed 12 students and a teacher with a gun, and knives and bombs made by their own. It is known that those two criminals acquired the information of making weapons through the internet. As soon as these terrible incidents happened, many people argue that such violences are consequences of the media, and they insisted that the video nasties must be banned, for they easily influence the kids and then lead to the bad behaviors which harm the society. These concerns quickly led to debates about the relationship between the society, media, and the audience. And this debate is mainly about what kind of the role media plays in our society. As mentioned earlier, many people are negative to the impact of the media. The majority of the scholars in the field of psychology tend to believe that media such as TV and internet disengage their audience from important things in society and harm the young age audiences through showing contents which depicts violence and crime. So here, the key concern of these scholars is that the need to protect children from the effects of the media. However, there are also scholars that argue the opposite. They tend to see children's interaction with the media as socially useful events. According to their opinions, children's interaction with the media are actually very complex, and rather than unthinkingly accepting whatever the media shows to them, they are able to choose to watch sophisticated media literacy. When we talk about the media effects, we cannot skip a scholar named David Gallant. In his opinion, the reason why there is still no clear answer on media effects is because the psychologists use the wrong way on doing the media effects research. In this reading, Gallant systematically demonstrates the problems in the existing effects research by working through the work of the other scholars, showing the flaws and problems in the ways in which research is carried out, and the resulting conclusions drawn from it. From now on, we will precisely study Gallant's thoughts on the effects research through the article 10 Things Wrong with the Media Effects Model. The first flaw of the effects research Gallant pointed out is that the effects model tackles social problems backwards. Gallant suggested that to explain the problem of violence in the society, researchers could begin with that social problem and seek to explain it with reference to the people who engaged. It could be their background, lifestyle, and so on. However, the media effects approach started with the media and then tried to connect it with the social being, which turned out to be wrong in the viewpoint of Gallant, who criticized that the media effects approach came at the problem backwards. Gallant also claimed that The conclusion of the research differs depending on where the start point of the study is placed. So the media effects approach made mistake of merely looking at individuals rather than a society in relation to the media. Hence, by using narrowly individualistic approach, psychologists fail to look at the bigger picture. The second flaw is that the effects model treats children as inadequate. Gauntlet argued that the psychologists tend to regard the children as incompetent social beings who must develop through particular stages before reaching adult maturity. Apparently, Gauntlet disagrees with this point of view. In this article, he cited the research which argues that children can and do understand about and from the mass media. Also, with the help of his own research, Gauntlet claims that children as young as 7 can make thoughtful, critical, and media literate video production. For the third flaw, Gauntlet pointed out that regarding mass media as the major threat to social stability is conservative ideology. Effect studies tend to ignore the meanings of the depiction of violence and treat all the violences are shown for bad reasons. For example, the most gratuitous acts of violence in the Beavis and Butthead, it can be interpreted as rationally resistant reaction to the oppressive world. Gauntlet suggests that the opportunistic mixing of concern about violence, political reservation about media contents is actually the lazy form of propaganda. From the fourth to sixth flaws are about the methodological errors. The fourth flaw of the effects studies is that they inadequately defines its own objects of study. For example, the definition of media material, such as antisocial programming as well as characterization of behavior in the real world such as antisocial behavior, are inadequate. According to Gauntlet, not all the verbal aggression of action, such as hitting an inanimate object, are really the act of violence, because they don't lead to severe actions in the real world. The fifth flaw of effect studies is that they are often based on artificial elements and assumptions within studies. Gauntlet argued that sociological studies of media effects are heavily outnumbered by simple studies which are characterized by elements of artificiality. Hence, Gauntlet claimed that these circumstances of research render the study invalid. Apart from the aforementioned flaws, Gauntlet also pointed out that some studies apply the methodological procedure wrongly or drew inappropriate conclusions from other methods. For example, Gauntlet claimed that the work of Huseman and Aaron longitudinal panel study failed to keep the procedure, and this led to their work results contradict another study conclusion which they did 8 years later than the former one. The seventh flaw of the effect study is that they selectively criticize media depiction of violence. As you can see, here are people holding guns in both two pictures. Left pictures is a scene from the movie Takers. Two guys are having an exchange of gunfire with the police. Right picture is a screenshot from CBS News. The ISI soldiers are preparing to kill the hostages. Clearly, both of them have the depiction of violence. However, Gauntlet argued that the media depiction of violence, which the effects model typically condemns, are limited to the fictional production. Here, Gauntlet suggests that if the antisocial acts in the films are expected to have an effect on the behavior of the audience, then violent acts in the news have the similar effect as well. The eighth flaw is that the effects model assumes a superiority to the masses, just like a certain portion of people who think that the negative effects of the media could only be on others. Gauntlett argued that some researchers and campaigners also think the similar way. Even worse, some scholars such as George Gardner, who ignores the serial nature of many TV programs and simply treats heavy TV viewers as people who have no selectivity or critical skills. Gauntlett apparently disagrees with those researchers who treat the mass audiences as potential savages, or simply actual fools. The ninth flaw is that the effects model makes no attempt to understand meanings of the media. Gauntlett asserted that on how to understand the meaning of certain media content, the result just differs from person to person. However, the effects model proponents tend to ignore these facts. Instead, they write roughshod over both meanings that actions have for characters in dramas and the meanings which those depicted acts may have for the audiences. Hence, Gauntlett claimed that the effects model rests on the base of reductive assumption and just unjustified stereotypes regarding the media contents. Lastly, the flaw number 10 is the effects model is not grounded in theory. Gauntlett argued that effects model doesn't cope with the most basic question of why the media would include people to imitate its contents. And they didn't explain how merely seeing an activity in the media would be translated into an actual motive that prompted an individual behavior either. Hence, Gauntlett asserted that lack of firm theory has led to the effects model could only be rooted in the set of questionable assumptions. To visualize aforementioned Gauntlett's arguments, I prepared this organization map. In order to demonstrate his assertions directly, I either simply selected the keywords and sentences or just summarized his opinions and then came up with a title for each argument. Personally, I think this chapter can be seen as a guideline for doing a proper media effects study. So as you can see from this map, proper media effects study consists of 10 elements. And it's important. 1. It's important to set the social problem as the starting point of the research. Otherwise, you will take social problems backwards, just like Gauntlett mentioned in the article. 2. Researchers should not understand child's ability on dealing with the media contents, so you have to acknowledge children's capacity properly while doing the research. 3. Looking at media contents, especially the depiction of violence, in the viewpoint of the conservative ideology is not appropriate. Gauntlett suggested that the violence acts in the media contents do have meanings. Not all of them are pure violence. Then from 4 to 6, Gauntlett requested researchers to mind the methodological errors. He suggested that the researchers need to define the study projects adequately and should rely on valid study conclusions and apply proper methodological procedure during the research. 7. Depiction of violence in the news are the same as those in common media contents such as film and drama. They all influence the audiences. So researchers should not just exclude the depiction of violence in the news while doing the research. 8. Researchers should treat the mass audiences properly as the study object, for they got reasons consuming media contents in their way, and it is not because they are actual fool or savage. 9. Researchers need to fully understand the meaning of the media content, since the perception on a certain media content just differ from person to person. And lastly, rather than assumptions of stereotypes, proper theories are needed to support assertions, otherwise it renders the study invalid. Moving on to conclusion. Gauntlett said that the existing effects model has remarkably little going for it as an explanation of human behavior or of the media's roles in society. However, it doesn't mean that the impact of the mass media can no longer be considered or investigated. Actually, there are still many fascinating questions to be explored about the influence of the media upon audiences' perception. Hence, Gauntlett suggests that in order to conduct great researches, we should not follow the traditional methodological recipes which have so many flaws with procedures. Thank you for listening.